All right, so you want to know how to select the right spinnerbait and catch a lot of bass on them. We got a lot to cover, so I'm just going to dive right into it. Spinnerbaits, for me, I've been fishing them since the 70s, and that's one of my favorite baits, so I've experimented a lot. A lot of guys, when they talk about spinnerbaits, they talk about size and color and don't talk about much more. There's a lot more to talk about than that, so let's get size and color out of the way first. Size, the bread and butter size everybody throws is a 3/8 ounce spinnerbait. You better have that in your tackle box. That seems to catch the most fish for a lot of guys. Nothing wrong with that. I've used them before. I've caught fish on them. I like to use heavier spinnerbaits. I use 3/4 ounce spinnerbaits. Not because I want to slow roll it on the bottom, but because it's more versatile. I can burn it back to the boat quickly and it won't lay over to the side as much. I can bring it back at a medium speed. I can bring it back at a slower speed. Plus, I can throw it in a thick cover and it will come out. That's what I really like about them. So there's a bit of a personal preference in there, but if you're new to spinnerbaits, be sure you at least have 3/8 ounce spinnerbait, but it's okay to go a little bit heavier too. As for color, white and chartreuse, are like the three main colors. White is like 90% of the time. I fished all around this country throwing spinnerbaits, and I've caught bass in a whole wide range of different types of body of water and different conditions, and I've caught them all on white spinnerbaits. I will use white and chartreuse when the water's really dingy, or if I'm targeting just smallmouth, then I'll use straight up chartreuse. They seem to like that bright, flashy color. Other than that, once in a while, I'll deviate from that and maybe throw little strands of red in there, or maybe dip the trailer in chartreuse to make it look a little more like a bluegill. So it's okay to experiment a little bit. One thing you keep in mind though is if you're night fishing using a spinnerbait, use a black color. It has the best silhouette in those dim light conditions, and it's easier for the bass to see. So a black or black and blue skirt is what I use for night fishing with spinnerbaits. Okay, we got that out of the way. Now let's talk about blades. And again, some people will dive into blades and blade choices. There's more to it than that, and we'll get to that in a minute, but let's talk about blades, because that to me is really important. Blades are basically there's three main blades. There's a lot of different shapes out there, but the three ones you're going to use the most are the Colorado, Indiana, and willow leaf blades. Colorado blades provide the most lift. And what I mean by that is if you've got three identical spinnerbaits, and with each of those different blades, the Colorado, you pull those, retrieve those at the same speed. The spinnerbait with the Colorado blade is going to ride highest in the water column, followed by the Indiana, and then followed by the willow leaf. So that's important to note. You would think, okay, if I want to burn it back towards the surface, I'm going to use Colorado. You could, but no. That's not what I do. Colorado to me is perfect for slow rolling in deeper depths because it has more lift. It keeps the bait upright at a slower speed, where the others will start to fall over. So Colorado blade for me is good wintertime fishing. It's good when I want to target deep structure in the summertime. And it also puts out a good thump to it. So the bass can hone in on one with their lateral lines better. So when the water's really dingy, cloudy, they can't see as much, that's a good time to use a Colorado blade. Or when you're fishing deeper, when the sunlight penetration isn't as much, Colorado blade gives off that vibration, bass can find it easier. So that's good scenarios for Colorado. The Indiana blades is kind of the jack of all trade, is very versatile. I can burn a spinnerbait back with an Indiana, I can slow roll it, I can do it at a moderate speed. They put out a little more flash than a Colorado, but not as much vibration. To me, I can fish them virtually anywhere. That's the blade I use the most on my spinnerbaits year round, just because of that versatility. Because you never know with the spinnerbait. That's the cool thing, is you can throw them in anything. You can throw them under docks, you can throw them in the bushes, you can throw them in long weed lines in deep water, you can burn them back. You can do all that with the Indiana fairly well. The willow leaf blades, they're named because they look like a willow leaf, but they also have a bait fish profile to them. And they give off the most amount of flash with the least amount of vibration. So you have like a double willow leaf spinnerbait, well, it looks like bait fish going through the water. It's really good to use them like when the bass are busting shad up on the surface, throw a double leaf spinnerbait willow-leaf spinnerbait out into that frenzy, and you're likely to get whacked because it looks like baitfish that are trying to escape, trying to flee. You burn a spinnerbait that's got double willow leaf, and that's exactly what it looks like, a fleeing baitfish, and you can trigger those reaction strikes. So willow leaf can be really good for those situations. Blade colors, people talk about those a lot. Really, for me, it's going to be either gold or silver. I use gold most of the time, again, around the country, because you either got like gold shiner or you've got perch or sunfish. They've all got some tints of gold in them, and that seems to get the most bites for me. A lot of guys, when the water's really clear or it's really sunny out like it is today, they like to use silver, and that puts out the most amount of flash, and bass further away can see it, and it can call them in that way. So silver can be really good when you got those situations. But those are the two main colors. I wouldn't experiment much beyond that. Now there's other things besides that. For example, trailers. A lot of guys like to put stingers, trailer hooks on the back of spinnerbaits if the bass are following it or short striking the lure. I like to throw my spinnerbaits into the thick cover like you do a jig. Don't be afraid to huck that thing right into the weeds, into submerged bushes. It'll come out. It is fairly weedless. You'd be surprised. That big wire, arm blocks a lot of weeds. It actually works like a weed guard. And so you put a trailer hook on the back, well, that kind of eliminates that. You can't throw it into those weeds or over the tops of weeds or along the sides of the weeds where you're likely to bring back all that trash with that trailer hook. So I don't use trailer hooks. In fact, what I've noticed is if a bass is following the bait or it's short striking it, they're telling you something. Something's not quite right with it. And I've found through experimentation that typically you change the blade color, that's what gets the strike. I can't tell you why, I just know it does. If I'm using a gold blade and I'm getting those follows, I flip over to a silver blade, boom, I get bites. It's a thing. So keep that in mind. So instead of using stinger hooks, I use trailers. Twin tail trailers are my favorites. The Zoom twin tail trailers, other brands, Big Bite Baits and Yum Bait, they make different, twin tail trailers. I just use white, straight up white. Sometimes I'll dip them in chartreuse. Again, if I'm getting those following bass, I might dip a little chartreuse or put a chartreuse trailer in there instead. Just a little slight color change. That's just a little variance, not a massive change, and that typically is what triggers those bites. But that trailer gives a little more bulk and a little bit more vibration. You can use 5-inch grubs as well. That's an excellent trailer. And this, some people use swim baits, small 3-inch, 4-inch paddle tail swim baits as trailers. There's no wrong here. So you can definitely use those, and that gives off a bigger profile, a little more vibration, something for the bass to focus in on and bite. I think that's a far more effective way for catching fish than using a trailer hook. There's more to it than that though. The gear that people use, and especially the line, plays a critical role in spinnerbait success. So I'm going to briefly talk about the rod and reel, but it's the line that I really want to talk about. Rod and reel, for reel, you want to use a 7-foot to 7.3 medium heavy fast action rod. That's like the ideal rod for spinnerbait fishing. You've got the backbone for setting a hook. Most of these spinnerbaits have a 4/0 or 5/0 thick hook, so you need a rod that's got a good strong backbone to set those hooks. And you still have the tip for accuracy, especially the short underhanded casts. You need that tip to give you that accuracy, and you can also feel the vibrations of the blades better with a fast action tip. Sometimes the bite is just a matter of the change of the cadence in the blade, especially the Colorado blade, but you'll feel that steady pulse and vibration, and then it does a little hiccup. And oftentimes that's just the bass biting. They come up behind it and they bite it and keep going at the same pace, but that blade, all of a sudden you'll lose contact with that vibration of the blade, set that hook. So that rod is critical to success. The reel, somewhere in the mid 6s, like a 6.5, 6.6 to 1 reel is ideal. You can go up to a 7 to a 7.4 if you like to bring them back real quick all the time, but that's going to be difficult to do the slow rolling and slow presentations with a gear ratio that fast. So I can do it. I've done it with a 7:3 to 1 gear ratio. It's not impossible. You don't have to run out and buy a new reel if you don't have one in the 6 range just for spinnerbait fishing. But it's also, those reels you can use for a variety of other things too in bass fishing. So it's not a bad idea to have a reel or two with that gear ratio available to you. The line is what's important. A lot of guys think these days that braid is the answer and we're going to use braid on everything. No, you're not. Braid is not a universal line, believe it or not. In matter of fact, you're fishing in rocks and in riprap and things like that, braid is actually less abrasion resistant than fluorocarbon in rocks. In my first observations, I thought, boy, that sure seems like braid is fraying a lot more than I expect it to. And so I talked to my friends at Seagar and asked them, hey, is braid actually less abrasion resistant than fluorocarbon? They went to the engineers and yeah, they confirmed it. Yeah, fluorocarbon is more abrasion resistant than braid. The other thing about braid is if you're throwing it in woody cover, in logs and laydowns and things that have been sitting in the water for a while, braid tends to dig in to that wood, whereas fluorocarbon glides over the top of it. And when you're throwing spinnerbaits in and through and around this kind of cover, you don't want the braid to dig into it. You want the fluorocarbon to slide over it, especially if you catch a bass and he burrows down into that stuff. The braid digs into that wood, well then it just provides leverage for the bass to get free. So fluorocarbon, a lot of people, they lose bass or don't catch as many bass because they're using braid, not fluorocarbon. Now I use straight up fluorocarbon. I know that's expensive. A lot of people don't want to spool their entire reel with fluorocarbon. If that's the case, you want to use braid as a backing, but you still want to leave 60 to 80 yards of fluorocarbon there. The thing is, think about it this way. If you have a long cast, as long as the furthest cast you can make with a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait, if a bass hits it on the end of that cast, which happens, I've had that happen, you don't want the knot from the braid to fluorocarbon to be out in the open. You want that braid to be buried in your reel. So when you set the hook, you're not putting any stress on that knot. I've seen far too many guys set the hook with that knot out there and poink! They've lost their fish, they've lost their spinnerbait, and a good chunk of expensive fluorocarbon. So yeah, use braid as a backing, but for spinnerbait fishing, you want to leave plenty of fluorocarbon out there so that you don't have that problem. I use fluorocarbon as a Seagar Invisix fluorocarbon line. It is a universal all-purpose line. You can throw it anywhere, especially with spinnerbaits. It's really abrasion resistant, but it's not unmanageable. It casts really, really well. So that, to me, that's the ideal fluorocarbon to use for spinnerbaits. So with that information, you are going to be able to catch bass on spinnerbaits, I promise. Wait, hold up. Now, if you've watched the video this long, then you be sure you want to watch one of these 2 videos here. Now this one here, this is the one that YouTube thinks you want to watch next. This is the one, I've handpicked this one for you to watch next based upon this video. Either way, I'm in both videos, so I'll see you in a few seconds.